Hey, I'm Beth Riley, and this is the Artist Spotlight podcast series. And today I have a very special guest with me from Impellitteri. It is Chris Impellitteri, who is known as the Speed King. He's known as one of the fastest guitarists of all time, and he's known as my good buddy today. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Beth. I'm honored.
Yeah. We'll talk about Impellitteri's 3-CD compilation album, Wake the Beast, in just a bit. Excited to do that. But there's a few things I definitely have to talk to you about first. And one of them, I'm going to go ahead and start out on a sad note. You named the band Impellitteri, which is, of course, your last name, but it was because of the loss of your parents at the age of 9, and you were raised by your grandparents, and that was kind of your way to honor them. How did the music that they listened to, how did it inspire you?
Well, I got to be honest, growing up with my grandparents, it was interesting because my grandmother would listen to things like Engelbert Humperdinck. She would listen to different artists, but it was obviously not the kind of music I'm known for, right? There'd be classical music in the house. There'd be Tom Jones, stuff like that, which was her generation. When you listen to this, I'm not kidding, people are going, who? But if you listen to like Engelbert Humperdinck or Tom Jones, any of those artists, great melody, great vocalists, like huge power. And I found that over the years, I realized, oh my God, the singers that I've always had in the band, Rob Rock and Graham Bonnet, they have those type voices where they have tremendous range, power, and vibrato.
Absolutely.
So, that was kind of what was in the house.
Yeah. And Tom Jones is a Riley household favorite, so.
Nice.
So when did you start playing guitar? At what age were you?
I think I was 12 years old when I began playing. And it was actually my grandmother. After I lost my mother and father, my grandmother, I'll never forget, she brought me to a music store. It was called Mundell's Music. And on the wall, there were two guitars. There were multiple guitars, but there were two specific ones. One was a copy of a Gibson Les Paul, and it was black. The other was a copy of a Fender Stratocaster, which was cream. And I remember I chose the black one, and my grandmother bought it for me. I think it was like $137. And I remember she literally paid for me to take lessons for 5 years. And I'd probably say the first year in, as soon as I picked up that guitar, I just became obsessed with it. So that's really where it began.
And who would you say some of your influences are or were?
That's a loaded question. I can tell you huge influences from the time I was a kid all the way till today. I always loved classical music, always loved Vivaldi, right? Bach, Mozart. So I love the great, the classical artists. But at the same time, if you were to ask me, like, who inspired me as a guitar player when I was a little kid, there would be guys like Brian May from Queen. There would have been Gary Moore, who was in Thin Lizzy. There were guys like Al Di Meola. And, of course, Eddie Van Halen was a huge influence, especially the first record, and Randy Rhoads. So, those were kind of like the core influencers initially.
Now, I have to ask you about the AC/DC tribute band you were in called QT Hush.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
It was interesting. It actually taught me a lot. A lot of people know me as a technical guitar player, right? I'm in a metal band. I use a lot of classical influence on the solos that I do. But, in the end, I think what I learned about AC/DC, or what it helped me, is to simplify things, make it palatable. So I can play like 30-second note triplets at a really fast tempo and play kind of some sort of classical phrasing that could really be quite complex. But with kind of like doing that AC/DC tribute for a couple of years, I learned how to simplify stuff where the average listener could really get into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have a favorite song by AC/DC?
Oh man, they have too many great songs. Are you kidding me? There's like, obviously everybody, I will always love the tone, the riff, and the entrance to Highway to Hell.
Yeah.
It just has so much power to it. But listen, I love Hell's Bells. I think the Back in Black albums are my favorites. Let There Be Rock, A Whole Lot of Rosie. I love all that stuff. For Those About to Rock is another biggie, and I've always loved that. Just loved his playing, loved Malcolm's rhythms, loved Bon Scott.
And they had an album maybe a year or two ago that they released, and there was a song on it called Shot in the Dark. That's great, great song, if you haven't heard it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's funny, before, actually, I think it was in 1991 or 92 when we brought in our bass player, who's been with us ever since that period of time, James Pulley, at that time we were also auditioning drummers, and one of the drummers that kept auditioning, he played with us probably like 5 times, was a guy named Simon Wright, who had actually played drums in AC/DC for a couple records and a couple tours.
Oh, really? That's cool.
And great player. But yeah, it's kind of a little interesting, story of like how AC/DC ultimately did become connected to us.
Yeah. Now, you kind of touched on it just then, but I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper. Tell me about some of the members, past and present, of Impellitteri and how you guys met.
Sure. So the core foundation of this band has always been myself, our current vocalist, Rob Rock, who did the very first Impellitteri album and did the majority of them, and James Pulley, who's been our bassist since 1991. So those 3 guys are the core. I met Rob Rock. He was actually opening for Greg Allman, and I was lending Greg Allman some of my equipment. He was playing a gig somewhere in Connecticut, and I remember I went in, I think I went on Greg's tour bus, said, pleasantries, hello, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. And then I went into the club. I was getting ready to leave, and I heard this band, and it was the opening act. It was called the Robert Allen Band. And I remember hearing the singer going, who is this? This guy's insane. And, he's hitting all these high notes, got this great vibrato, all this power. And it was Rob Rock. And I remember after I actually stayed for their whole set, went backstage, talked to him, and within 3 days, him and I were at the same venue in the daytime rehearsing with the band, writing music, and we had instant chemistry. And so that's how we met. As far as James Pulley, he came into the picture in 91 when we were looking for a permanent bass player, right? Because we had Chuck Wright before that on Stand in Line and Ted Days on our original record, which is the Impellitteri Black EP. So we actually met James. He was going to MIT, Musicians Institute, and, great bass player. So that's it. And, he instantaneously fit. So those were those 2 guys. There's Graham Bonnet. Graham Bonnet is a legendary rock singer. I mean, most people around the world, especially in Europe and Japan, places like that, they know Graham very well. Graham had been the lead singer of the band Rainbow, which, in the late 70s, they were massive in Europe and Japan.
Yeah.
So big, I mean, even that they headlined, at that time, Download Festival, I think it was called Castle Donington, and Graham and Rainbow headlined that, and the band that was opening was AC/DC, just to tell you how big they were. And so Graham and I met, I think during Alcatraz, they had called me to see if I'd be interested in replacing their guitar player at the time, who was a guy named Yngwie Malmsteen. And nothing happened with that. They ended up going with a guy named Steve Vai. He was a great player. I was much too young for them at that point. But anyways, Graham and I stayed friends. And after Rob Rock, we had tremendous success with the Impellitteri Black EP. Rob Rock decided to go do another project. So he left the band. And Graham and I bumped into one another, and Graham was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, dude, I'm bummed. We have all the success right now brewing with the Impellitteri Black EP. All these magazines around the world are they're giving us like 5 out of 5 stars. We just had a huge buzz, especially in LA, even when we were playing live. But when Rob left, all of that ended because he was half the sound of the band. So I told Graham what happened, and he was like, yeah, he was bummed too because he just ended his band Alcatraz. So, cut the story short, before we know it, Graham and I probably a week later, we're at Graham's house writing together, and the first song we wrote together was the song Stand in Line. I remember doing that record, and, it did, especially in places like Japan and Europe, the record just exploded, and we instantaneously got a lot of fans. I don't know if it was luck, right place, right time, maybe the right song, but that's how Graham came into the band for the first time, because he would come back again at a later time, but that was it. Drummers. We've been a bit like Spinal Tap with drummers over the years. We started with this amazing drummer who was almost like a thrash drummer named Lonnie Silva on the first Impellitteri Black EP, which really kind of put us on the map in Europe and Japan. And then we did Stand in Line. We brought in a drummer named Pat Torpey, rest his soul. And Pat was a guy, he had played with Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin. A lot of people in our era, they know him for being the drummer of the band Mr. Big. So, Pat did the Stand in Line record with us. He actually guided us, to be honest. A lot of what we did was really kind of under, I almost want to say the guidance of Pat. He was much older than I was, but just really instrumental in shaping that record. So that was Pat. And then we brought in Glenn Sobel. And Glenn Sobel did the majority of the Impellitteri records and tours overseas. And now Glenn today plays with Alice Cooper, and he also has a band called the Hollywood Vampires with Johnny Depp, the actor, and Alice Cooper and Joe Perry and those guys. So he was one of the drummers we had. Loved Glenn. Ken Mary, another guy who played with Alice Cooper, was in Impellitteri for a while. And then the recent records, which we have two new records. One is called Venom. The other is The Nature of the Beast. That's with a drummer named John Deddy, who had played with bands like Slayer and Testament. So that was a lot to say.
Yeah, well, hey.
And there are more people. There were bass players like Chuck Wright, who was an amazing bass player. He had played with Quiet Riot. Rudy Sarzo actually did a live show with us. Who was Whitesnake Ozzy. We've had, we've certainly had the revolving door, especially on the drummer side.
Most of the time it's like bass players or guitar players, but it's nice to hear there's drummers out there that are a revolving door too.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Impellitteri, the sound of it, it's always been Chris and Rob and James, or Chris, Graham, and James, right?
Yeah.
So the nucleus of the band, the core of the band, has always been the same band, almost since inception, which is really cool.
As promised. I promised you, I promised everybody. We're going to talk about Wake the Beast.
Okay.
Which I have a feeling is about me until I've had coffee, but it could just be me. I don't know. Could just be in my head. Tell me about that album and how, or the albums, and how you decided on which ones to put on the compilation album.
Sure. Well, Wake the Beast is an anthology, and it's kind of like a best of. A lot of people that don't know the band Impellitteri in America, because, I mean, we were on MTV a lot in the late 80s, but we were never a hair band. We weren't really part of that scene. Our popularity really was systemic or really rooted deeply in places like continental Europe, Japan, we go over and play in Spain. We could play, 20, 30,000 people. Germany, we play massive festivals, those kind of things. So for the people that are unaware of us, Wake the Beast is really a way to expose you to who this band is, right? What we're about musically, what we sound like. And, over the years, when we play concerts, especially in places like Japan or Europe, we kind of know what songs really resonate with our fans, because as soon as we start the opening riff, or the chorus comes in and you have literally 10 or 20,000 kids screaming and singing every word with you, these songs resonate and they've touched them in some way in a positive manner. So a lot of that influenced us as to what songs we should put on these records or on this anthology, right? And so that's kind of how this thing came about. And also the reason we're releasing it now, 30 years into our career, is we finally got the legal rights back to our masters where we could release it. So it's exciting for us as a band because a lot of this music is brand new to the majority of the human population,
And it was released on September 30th of this year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted that in there somewhere.
Yeah, about 4 weeks ago. Yeah. And the idea for people, I want people to understand this too. This isn't one of those records like when we do our normal, like we'll do a new record release probably mid 2023 or close to summer, followed by a big tour. But with this record, all we're doing is we want to make this music available now to anybody that's interested in the band, right? Because for years, I think what happened is because we sold so many records in places like Japan, probably millions of records, there was some sort of interest or curiosity that developed on the band. Like our success in Japan and certain places in Europe overflowed into other countries where a lot of, especially metal fans or guitar fans or whatever, they became curious about the band, so they'd buy our records, but they pay these crazy prices because they were all imports, right? Which made us always feel bad. So really what we're doing now is we're trying to make the music accessible to everybody and make sure it's affordable.
Now, there are over 30 tracks on the compilation album, but if you could point someone in the direction of a song, one song, which one song would you point people in the direction of?
Wow, that's a great... Well, so we have two singers, and that's where it gets challenging. Let me answer your question incorrectly, but I'll do it this way.
Okay.
If you don't like us by the end of the third song, you'll never like us, right? It's literally that clear. So Victim of the System, which is the opening track, that's Rob Rock, right? Who's done the majority of the work. The second song is Graham Bonnet, which is Perfect Crime. And then we go back to Rob with Power of Love, and that really kind of gives you a great idea of what this band sounds like sonically. Now, the fifth song on the record, there's an instrumental called 17th Century Chicken Pickin'. There are literally thousands of kids on YouTube playing my instrumental song, so it's really touched the musician side of it. So if you want to go a little bit more deep, those are the kind of tracks I'd first listen to. I think, like I say, in all sincerity, if you listen to those three songs, listen to them all the way through, But the end of the third song, if you don't like us, you never will.
Right.
But if you're going to like us, you'll probably love us by the end of that third song.
No, the third song is the one that jumped out at me, The Power of Love. I'm what you call a fan of Rob Rock. So
yeah, I love Rob.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, everybody musically, probably personally too, is just awesome.
That's awesome. Rob is such an amazing, talented singer. I mean, I've told people this in interviews, and this is just, in my humble opinion, it's true. Rob Rock and Graham Bonnet are equally as good as Ronnie James Dio, Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, Rob Halford of Judas Priest, Ian Gillan of Deep Purple. I mean, I could go on and on. I've been around and worked with some amazing singers that I won't name drop right outside of the band. But, these guys that I've been so fortunate and blessed to have as part of the team, over the years, their talent is just immense.
And you mentioned Deep Purple. I have a funny story about them. I'm completely unrelated to anything, but I like telling people this story. In middle school, for me, I played trumpet in the school band. Our little school marching band song was Smoke on the Water, which, of course, Deep Purple.
I love it. I love that.
So most of the time when people say Deep Purple, I'm like, hush. And people don't know how to take me, but, little fun fact about me.
Right. Great response. Use the Deep Purple song Hush as the response.
Yes. Name an artist that you wished you could work with that you maybe haven't had the chance to work with yet.
Gotta be honest, I think that ship has sailed. I mean, I'm always down with working with new people on projects, but, I always did love Ronnie Dio. And it's a shame. I mean, I would have liked to have done something with him. He was one of those voices that just would have fit great with my guitar playing, as you can kind of hear, because Rob Rock has a very similar voice to Ronnie as well.
Oh, yeah.
So he was one of those guys. But, look, I mean, I have many years left in life, so, who knows? I'm sure there'll be someone that will cross paths with me and I'll do some new project with. A couple of years back, I did a project called Animetal, which was really focused or centered on Japan market. Mm-hmm. And Sony Music put together this band, which originally I don't go out of the Impellitteri group. I usually just stay very loyal to my own band, but this is one of those offers I couldn't pass up. One, because they paid me an obscene amount of money, but in all honesty, it was a very cool experience. And it was myself, it was Rudy Sarzo, who had played with Whitesnake and Ozzy. It was Pat Travis, who's current drummer of Judas Priest, and Mike Vicero, who had played with a band called Loudness in Japan. And so that was kind of an interesting project and fun to do something just unique as a side fun project, But who knows? I mean, there are many amazing artists out there that I would love to do something. I'd love to do a heavy rock song with Steve Perry.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I am a huge Journey fan. Of course, Steve Perry days. And Arnel Pineda, he's very good too, talented. It's just not the same.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't, look, what Steve did when he was 30 years old or late 20s. I mean, look, a lot of singers, it's almost like they back themselves into a corner because they hit these amazing high notes, and a lot of the song, it's pretty much they're singing in that register really high, right? Like high tenor, soprano, alto, whatever. But, when you have these guys that are now in their 60s or early 70s, that's challenging.
Yeah.
And Arnel does a good job. As a matter of fact, Journey played with us. We played Sweden Rock Festival, I don't know how many years ago. It was quite a few years ago. It was Impellitteri, Journey, and Black Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and Journey went on after Impellitteri, and I remember being on the side of the stage, and I was watching Neil, of course, and then Arnel was, close your eyes, and like, my God, it sounds like Steve's on stage.
It does, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't tell him. I mean, I like him too. He's just fun.
Yeah. but I know what you mean. Of course, it's not Steve. I mean, Arnel's doing a hell of a great job, but Steve is Steve. You can't replace him.
I had the pleasure of meeting Jonathan Kane, who does, keyboards and stuff in Alabama about 5 years ago, and just as nice as you could imagine.
That's cool. Yeah, here's a great guy and a great composer.
Yeah, he is. Okay, you've worked with all these artists. Is there an artist that you have been starstruck by?
I live in Los Angeles, and I have to be honest, it's not, I don't know if I'm starstruck. I'll tell you some funny stories. So the very first Impellitteri record, which again, it's called the Impellitteri Black EP, we recorded that in Hollywood, California, at a studio named Baby O Recording Studios, right? Now, I'll tell you where I'm going with this. When I was like 11 years old, the first concert I went to was Kiss. It was for their Destroyer or Rock and Roll Over tour. And I remember it wasn't so much the music, it was a spectacle, because I was really more into bands like Queen and Deep Purple and Van Halen, right? But the show, I loved Kiss, and it was just like mesmerized by it, right? So when we were doing the first record, our engineer was a guy named Mikey Davis. And Mikey was, not only was he recording us, right, as we're recording that record, but he'd walk across the hall, which is literally 20 feet, go out the door, go across the hall 20 feet, go into the other room. He was working with none other than Gene Simmons doing Kiss demos. So one day, I was playing, I was shredding, doing something, and Mikey brings Gene Simmons in. And Gene Simmons comes in, we start talking, doing the pleasantries. And he heard me shred, and he said something like, "Don't you know any Eric Clapton or Cream?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, dun 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 dun. I'm like, okay. And he goes, no. And he comes up, and I have my guitar on. He comes, reaches over my shoulders behind me, and starts playing my guitar and playing the riff. And here I'm thinking, if the 11-year-old kid that saw Kiss in front of 20,000 screaming people knew that on my first record, this dude's going to be behind me, playing my guitar. That was one of the surreal moments, But then over the years, as I'm around these people all the time, now I'm like, yeah, you're just another dude,
Exactly. I have to ask you, because you mentioned Kiss. For Kiss, do you have a favorite member of Kiss?
Well, I've always loved Paul Stanley.
Okay.
I've always loved his voice, loved his songwriting. I've hung out with Paul. I don't know if you remember. It was many years ago. We were doing, I don't know if it was a stand-in-line record or after it, but we were at a place called Cherokee Recording Studios. And Kiss were there for a week when we were there. And I remember it was an interesting day. We were eating lunch. I'll never forget it. It was me, Dave Spitz, who was playing with Impellitteri. He was another bass player that played with us. And we were in the lounge area eating lunch. I remember Paul came in, Gene came in, and Gene introduced Paul to me. And we were sitting down at this little booth, and I had a white, it was like an Ovation acoustic guitar sitting on the floor. And Paul goes, "Hey, can I play it?" So that literally, I think for an hour, we must have sat there and I made him play every Kiss song. I mean, play I Stole Your Love. All right, now play Shout It Out Loud. Now play Tonight You Belong to Me from your solo record. Now play, Making Love, play Love Gun, It was hilarious. That was a fun moment. But so he was kind of one of those guys where I really liked him a lot.
So, I have to have a favorite song because they have a song for me. It's literally me.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so for me, because look, I like a lot of their music. I really do like Love Gun a lot. I like the solo in Love Gun. I like the vocal melody. Remember, Paul told me he wrote that literally on a plane. He was flying, I think he said, from L.A. to New York. And he said by the time he arrived at the airport, he had that song written in his head.
Yeah.
So I really like that song a lot.
It's the good
because
one.
you're only making me choose one, right? I like many of their songs.
I know. And see, I have to. Yeah, I have to be the hardcore one.
Beth. You want to be Beth because that's you.
That's me.
And it was a big hit single on Destroyer.
Exactly. So, like when people say, "Who's your favorite member of Kiss?" to me, I'm like Peter Criss because he did the song. But it's not actually Peter Criss, but.
But you love Beth.
I do.
That's a great name and a great song.
Thank you.
Since you're on the Kiss track, so I'll tell you another funny story.
Yeah.
So although I haven't seen him in many years, he was a good friend for quite some time, is actually a guy named Eric Singer, who's the current drummer of Kiss.
Right.
When we were doing the Impellitteri Grin and Bear It record, which was our first record with JVC Victor, that song Power of Love, song 3, we were working, it was me, Rob, and there was a drummer who was like, he'd bring his drum machine, program the drum parts, just so we get prepared to rehearse to go in and record that record. It was Eric. Oh. So Eric was going to be the drummer, and then he got the Kiss gig. So
of course he did.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to talk about your 2 daughters. I gotta bring in some family.
Okay.
All right, one's in the medical field and one's a lawyer.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, tell me about them and what they think of your music.
Well, first of all, I love my daughters more than life itself. I'm very blessed because, obviously losing my mother and father when I was 9 years old, I was somewhat of an orphan. Thank God for my grandparents. They gave me a great home and I love them. But, having my daughters really cemented the fact that, I have a life again. I have a purpose. And so, they're awesome. And, they're both very well educated. They're gorgeous. They're really good people. They're really humble. And, as a dad, I'm so proud of them both. They've achieved so much and they're young. They're still really young, but what they've achieved already just blows me away. As far as music, they love Impellitteri music. Although Brittany, my younger one, she tends to She'll a lot of times gravitate more towards, like hip hop.
Oh, geez.
Ash is more rock. Ash is the lawyer.
Well, there you go. See, lawyers have to rock out.
Absolutely.
If you could travel back to any time or a decade, year, what would you pick?
You got to go backwards, can't go forwards, son.
Well, you could. You can go forwards if you want to.
I think it'd be a lot, because look, we already know what happened based on history. We've got so much documentation about it, right?
Right.
All of us would love to go to Paris, go to, France or whatever in the 1700s or 1600s. But then again, you also have diseases and stuff that comes along with it. So it might be a little cooler to maybe, let's go out to the year 3000. I just want to know how Impellitteri music's being embraced at that point, because we're all gone. But the music better have lived on. I mean, look, I'm fascinated by history, but, there's always the romanticism, right, of being in, like, France or whatever in the, the 1600s or 1700s. But then again, the times are like, man, did they have air conditioning in the summer, and did they have heat in the winter?
Yeah.
I would love to have jammed with Vivaldi.
Yeah.
Mozart, Bach.
Are you a fan of Beethoven too?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
It's funny. Beethoven, people are always thinking of the Fifth Symphony, but for me, especially, I'm sure by now you can hear the way I play guitar solos. A lot of times it's pretty intricate. A lot of times there's a lot of fast musical passages, and Beethoven actually wrote one of my favorites, which is called "Rage Over a Lost Penny."
Yeah, that one's a good one.
Yeah. Million notes, but it has a great melodic structure to it.
If you could only have 3 to 5 albums with you on a desert island, which 3 to 5 albums would you take with you?
Okay, wow. Van Halen 1, Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia, Friday Night in San Francisco. That'd be 2. Diary of a Madman would be Ozzy. That would be 3. And you said 3 to 5?
3 to 5, yeah.
All right, so I'll be a little bit selfish. 4th one, I definitely take the Impellitteri Anthology.
Yes.
And then 5, Deep Purple Machine Head.
There you go. Put a Deep Purple one in there. Being in California, I always expect people to bring up one of 2 artists, if not 2 of 2. Jackson Browne, who's my favorite, one of my favorites.
Love him, yep.
Do you have a favorite Jackson Browne song?
No, not a favorite, but I love his music.
Okay, well, I'm good with that. As long as you didn't go, who is Jackson Browne? Then,
No, if you really want to go there, you ever watch the documentary on the Eagles?
Yes.
The Eagles and Jackson Browne used to be like flatmates, right?
Yeah, and
He lived in the same apartment place. They used to tell stories about Jackson would always drink tea every morning. So you hear his little tea kettle going off as he'd be writing, and every morning he'd be in there writing music.
Yeah, like Dr. My Eyes was, Dr. My Eyes drove Glenn Fry crazy. And
so you know the story then.
Yes. Yeah. Massive Jackson Browne fan, massive Eagles fan. I gravitate more towards Don Henley, but I love Glenn Fry, and rest in peace, sir.
I would go more towards Joe Walsh for me.
Yeah. Yeah, of course you would. Madman. Yeah, he's incredibly talented.
Yeah.
My other artist I have to ask you about is actually a band. They were around in the 60s. A little band called the Beach Boys.
Graham Bonnet's favorite band of all time.
Really?
Graham Bonnet was obsessed by the Beach Boys. As a matter of fact, Graham Bonnet actually hated heavy metal, really didn't like metal. He was really talented, gifted, and did it. If he could do anything differently, I'm sure he would be in a group like the Beach Boys. That was his passion. And yeah, you listen to like Pet Sounds. Heck, California Girls. All of the stuff Beach Boys did. Just insane 1-3-5 vocal harmonies, layers, orchestration. It's brilliant. Great music for people to study if you want to be more of a, an artist that's more well-rounded. You have more of a complex dialogue, ability to color songs, right?
Right.
With orchestration.
Now, outside of today, because today you and your wife are celebrating 31 years of marriage. Again, congratulations on that. But for you or for Impellitteri, what's next?
Well, we're working on a new record. So the new record we anticipate will either be released middle of 2023 or the summer of 2023. And then we're going to start touring and playing every place, every country in the world that will have us. Right? That's the idea. So we're really looking forward to this thing. That's really what's on our plate at the moment.
So any plans on coming to Joplin, Missouri?
I would love it. It's really up to the concert promoters, right?
Yeah.
And I got to be honest. Look, when we go overseas, like, I think the last show we did overseas, we headlined a festival. It was actually in Korea, believe it or not. It was the Busan Rock Festival, and, you know, we played there, and I remember Rudy Sarzo, again, who I played with Animetal, Rudy actually played bass with us. He actually came to Korea because our bass player James had some visa issues. And the reason I'm telling you this is when we played that show, it was one of those markets we hadn't played before. And we were like, man, are like 2 people going to come see us? 1,000 people? We had no idea, right? Kind of like if we went to Missouri. But I can tell you, when we walked on stage, there were 30,000 people that came to see us. Surreal.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the reason I'm saying that is it's when we come, if we're going to bring our production, you know, we're not a club band. You know, we have to play theaters or bigger.
Right.
And a lot of promoters, especially in the United States, they're terrified of us. And I understand why. They're probably terrified that, look, if they put us in an arena, are 200 people going to show up? Or will 10,000 people show up, right? None of us know that answer. So if Missouri, you know, if there are concert promoters that want to bring us, we're certainly open to listen to what they have in mind. I would love to play Missouri.
Listen up, Missouri promoters. This is your shout out. I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
Not really. Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and be a guest on the podcast. And best of luck to you and Impellitteri. And again, especially for today, congratulations again on 31 years of marriage.
Beth, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody to listening to this. I hope you guys get a chance to check out the band.